friendo, Steve here. Welcome back to the Friendoville channel, and it's time for another Four Lights review of Picard. This is episode 6. I think it's called something like The Impossible Box. Is that correct?
Yeah. Sounds right to me.
Anyways, as always, I'm joined by Tim. How you doing, Tim?
Great. This is it's a crazy time to be in. You know, we got highlights, we got lowlights, and then we have a wonderful world to live in that we have Picard. So.
I know. There's good, there's bad, and there's Picard. You're in a different scenario right now. You're not where you were, but you seem to be in a different part of your house right now.
I seriously just shifted. I would move it, but it's a little awkward. The bookshelf is right over there.
Oh, okay.
I just shifted things a smidgen, not a big deal.
A couple feet makes all the difference. Now you're in a completely new world.
It really, really does. But your lighting, you just sit there and tweak the moods and...
Yeah, I can get dark here. Like I'm in a cave now, or I can like bring some light to the situation. And it's just
I have a little LED slider. I can make it as bright or dark as I want.
Yeah. I gotta get a rim light right here on top of my head. Anyways, we're talking about Picard today. What do you think of episode 6 in a nutshell, Tim?
Man, it was it's emotionally driven, which I really, really like. And it carries the characters. Their emotional story carries on. Obviously, it's the next chapter. It didn't feel like a one-off episode, kind of like last week's did, but It still moved everything forward. Like I said, it was a lot of tension, too. I don't know if you noticed that or not. There was some scenes that were meant to be shot and feel very uncomfortable, kind of like a Jordan Peele Get Out sort of vibe. Yeah. And it plays, it's a different tone, but very well done.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the episode. I thought that we finally get, Picard meeting. Number one, there is my favorite Easter egg so far was in this episode, and it was the Zirconian door, transport door. Do you remember that door from Next Generation?
I don't. Somebody had mentioned it, and I'm just like, I'm sorry, I didn't catch it. But,
okay, so the door at the end that they went through was originally in... Hold on, it's a Zirconian door. That is not correct. TNG. Let's see if anybody...
you got to be really specific on Google sometimes.
I know. Hold on a second. Man, this bums me. I did not write it down. Zirconian? It's Zirconian.
Good. There you go. Hey Alexa, what's a Zirconian door? That'll freak out some people.
Oh man, dang it! It's not. None of this is coming up properly.
Comment in the post below. Let us know where it is because Steve doesn't know what he's talking about.
Hold on a second. What did I call it in my notes? Maybe I got the name wrong. Hold on a second.
It's too far down.
Sakarian. Hold on. Let's look at Sakarian. Anyways, there was this early season episode that I don't think me and Jeff have gotten to yet on like the regular Next Generation stuff. And I don't know if it's first season or second season, but it revolves around this ancient race or this ancient species on this planet that is sort of mythological, and people don't know if it's real or not. And the Enterprise finds out that it is, and they've got this door that can go like anywhere.
Only thing I'm thinking about
within 40,000 light years, and the fable was they were able to travel vast distances in order to conquer other races or other planets. And they would just appear out of nowhere.
Yeah, the civilization actually, like their planet they left behind, right? Like it was.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
their civilization was extinct.
Door,
yeah. Okay. I thought whenever you mention ancient civilizations, all I think of is Data downloading that whole civilization in his database, and they wear the masks.
Yeah,
that's the one I always think of when it comes to that stuff. But.
Star Trek door goes super far. Episode Next Generation. I'm gonna find this damn thing. This is bugging the crap out of me.
Okay, while you're doing that, let's kick off the episode. Starts off with a dream, kind of like what Picard did. This is a little, not previous shadowing, but we see Soji as a little girl. It's raining outside, really dark. She's afraid, and then she's trying to find solace in her dad. So she has a little bear, and she walks into her dad's lab. And she can't see him. There's the orchids are kind of blocking her way, and we just see the back of his head. And then the dad says, "Hey, Soji, you're not supposed to be in here." And she wakes up. Then she wakes up from her dream kind of nervous and everything, and she's there next to Narek. They've been sharing a bed together in the past couple of episodes. Mm-hmm. And they talk about secrets of, she's like, well, Romulans are known for secrets, and he goes, well, dreams kind of, carry secrets, and she thinks he's hiding stuff. So they have this kind of like cat and mouse, which they've been doing the past couple episodes, and he's basically the Romulans. In fact, Romulans are known for their secrets, but he kind of rebuttals and says everybody has secrets, which is very, very true, and he's obviously unlocking hers, which we find out more about in this episode. So after their kind of interaction, it kind of just dead ends, and she leaves. She's sitting there.
Apparently, it was a reference from a Voyager episode.
Okay.
Apparently, there was like a Voyager episode where they meet the Sicarians. Well, that would make sense because the Borg were heavily in the Delta Quadrant. That's still cool, but man, dude, I'm telling you, man. Wait a second.
Getting your Trek mixed up?
This is bugging the crap out of me right now. Anyways, go ahead.
Well, no, I mean, between the original series, the cartoon, TNG, the movies, Voyager, DS9, Discovery, the new movies, and Picard, you have 9 different sources depending on what you're following. So Anyway, I'll let you take off the next part.
Okay, hold on. I got it wrong, but it was so close. So if you watch an episode of Next Generation called Contagion, it is, I don't know if it's first season or second season, but it's the Iconians. Never mind, I totally got that wrong. I marked out. It's literally like the exact same thing, though, but obviously the Voyager episode actually deals with these aliens. I thought they were getting even a little bit more obscure. I'm a big nerd, so okay, it's the Iconians. I'm sure there are people in the comments who are watching this the entire time you're talking, and they're like, it's the Iconians, it's not the same thing, Steve.
They're yelling at you, yeah.
I know, I love when people yell at videos. Anyways, I'm sorry, continue.
No, you're fine, because we're going to cut over. He did mention a slight little, asked about the dreams and mentioned a conversation like, hey, did you talk to your mom? The conversation with the mom comes in later, but that's kind of the opening. The cat and mouse still between Narek and Soji is beginning.
Yeah, that reaches fever pitch in this episode, yeah.
Yeah, but then we cut over to Picard. I'll let you take it over.
All right, so after that, we've got Picard and Jurati and the doctor, and they're talking about Maddox, and she's explaining to Picard her version of why he died.
I mean, it was the truth without it was the truth without telling the whole. But yeah, his heart stopped. Well, you stopped his heart, but
his heart was under extreme stress. His body just couldn't handle it anymore. All the stuff that I pumped into him. And so, she's lying about that, and she's, and meanwhile, Elnor is just sort of sitting in the room, and he makes a little reference, he makes a little comment here and there, and I feel so bad for him because he'll say something, and like, for example, after she's talking about Maddox, they start talking about the cube and how they need to go there to see Soji, and he's like, well, what is the Borg? Picard mentions, it's a former Borg cube, and he says, the Borg, like 7? And he's like, no, it's nothing like 7, without giving any context. And so Elnor just sort of looks down like he feels stupid all of a sudden. And I feel bad because nobody's really filling him in on stuff that he probably should know about if he's the one protecting Picard.
Yes and no. I mean, but he's not there to really think. He's there to act. But, there's one of those things, too, where he kind of walks up and he wants to be involved. He wants to interject himself. But this conversation doesn't necessarily merit him being there. But it's nice to have him there. And it does add, even though you get some awkward character interactions, it's nice having that person to break the tension or to draw away from that. And he does the character does a very good job of that.
Yeah, he also puts his foot in his mouth quite a bit in this episode. But then he has a really cool heroic moment at the end, which we'll get to later on. So Picard is obviously pretty, and it's kind of interesting. They have, let me ask you this, how do you reckon this? They have kind of retconned out the first contact stuff. Technically, it wasn't a cube. It was a Borg sphere. But he was very heroic on that Borg sphere. He was getting up close and personal with the Queen, which was interesting. They did. First contact is when we meet the Borg Queen, and he remembers her. We didn't see her obviously in Next Generation, but he's like, no, I remember her being a presence That was in First Contact, and he was doing all sorts of heroic stuff and not really going through the fits. This sort of, to me, it's a little bit retconning, and it's a little bit, it's necessary for the character because it's very effective at this, and on top of that, it's sort of, I think, speaks to his age and fragility, because we see this full on how fragile his psyche is, and maybe it's sort of it's the accumulation of everything he's been through, and now he's got to deal with being on a Borg cube, and he's not so heroic now. But I do feel like they paid First Contact a little bit of short shrift for creative license in order to get that tension across. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you, especially with the fact that when there's the chick, the gal from the Earth, from the old time, that comes up and he starts freaking out at the Borg, and then at the end you kind of see that resolution, and and going forward he has that resolution, but you can almost think of it as PTSD.
Yeah, sure. For sure, yeah.
And so after he's gone, he has that, I'm never going to have to deal with this again. And all of a sudden he gets tossed back into it. And he hasn't dealt with it for so long. And then all of a sudden things are activating in the back of his brain. Mm-hmm. And so I wish if it was still an issue later on, but they still mention that people that have been assimilated and then are no longer assimilated, there's even somebody that recognizes him going to Locutus. Yeah. They're all still somewhat interconnected. So we don't know. And especially we haven't seen them. Besides the sphere, this is the last time he's been on a Borg entity, we can assume, since that happened. So it would be traumatic. You're right. It feels like it's one step forward, two steps back. But yet we felt for Picard. The way they did the flashes and everything else like that, you're like, oh my goodness, this is full-on panic mode. It was effective. You're right. A little step back for storytelling in First Contact, but still good. Still effective.
Yeah, I thought it was very effective. I was totally okay with it. But obviously sometimes, you think, wait a second, he totally had an adventure on a Borg sphere before, and he came face to face with the Queen. And now, but I do think that you got to have sometimes you have to sacrifice continuity to a degree to enhance story. And I think they did that okay here. So he's talking to Jurati about the Borg. She references Locutus and provides some exposition for that. Says some backstory. Says this is required reading in my field, and she talks about the Borg, and Picard kind of snaps. Not really snaps, but he gets pretty testy, and he's like, they don't. He says they don't. The Borg. Because she says, maybe the Borg can change. And he said, they don't change, they metastasize, which of course is a reference to cancer. He gets up and he leaves. Elnor mentions, he sort of puts his foot in his mouth again. He says something, was I in-butting, which is his awkward way of saying butting in terms of, because he mentions the doctor and how she's feeling tense. And obviously, she doesn't want to talk about, Maddox and that she killed him. So she gets sort of pissed off at him, and she leaves. So Elnor's figuring out. Again, I think Elnor's going to be one of those characters who, assuming he doesn't die, will hopefully be around. And if the series, goes, hopefully, God willing, 5 years, by year 3, he's going to be one of our favorites. Because I really do like the actor. And it's kind of like a Data thing, where Data started off, like every episode of Next Generation, it was this asinine thing he would say in the first season, as if he just came out of Dr. Sung's, lab. And it's like, dude, you've been around. That was 29 years ago that you came out of Dr. Sung's lab, and you're still acting like an idiot. But 2 years later, after 2 years of, people handling the Data character, Brent Spiner handling the Data character, he's a lot more savvy, not as savvy as maybe he is, much later. But I feel like Elnor is going to take that path. I think he's, very naive. He's singularly focused.
I actually really, really like the Elnor character, because sometimes he addresses, because with absolute candor being there, he addresses things that we may be thinking, or something so there's film direction, and the actor says, okay, act awkward, and then he goes in, there's tension in this room, and it fills in sometimes where if somebody can't act right. Not saying they're all great actors, but if somebody can't fill in, that fills in exposition in the background that sometimes are sorely missed, and I love it.
Well, it also heightens the tension that's already there, and just puts it out in the room and creates even more drama. So yeah, I liked Elnor in this episode. So after that, Picard goes into his hollow chateau and starts looking up Borg stuff on his computer. He references Borg treaty and I think Romulan or something like that, or Tal Shiar. And of course, he comes across some pictures of him as Locutus, Borg stuff in general, and then he comes across a shot of Hugh as he looked back then and as he looks today, and sort of figures, okay, this is going to be my in to the artifact, to the Borg cube. After that, we've got Girardi.
Oh, hold on. This scene, really quick, it was brilliantly shot, but it did one faux pas and one really good shot. The faux pas was they used shots from the episodes, from the movies, from the, and that we might be going back into the limitations of budgeting. They didn't get pictures of Picard. I understand the one where he was Locutus and he was on the screen, and then they did the beam right into the camera sort of thing. They probably would have been recording all that. I understand having shots from that, but Hugh, the picture from Hugh was definitely from the last episode that we just saw. So there's some few moments that took you out, but the really interesting thing is that the screens are clear. They're holographic,
They're translucent,
right?
yeah.
They're translucent. So when the camera starts panning, you see old Picard and Locutus, and then they eventually pan over, and Picard and Locutus are right over top of each other. I don't know if you noticed this, but Picard puts his hand over where his eye mount was, so he's like, it's really, really affecting him. I really liked that shot. In my opinion, that made him, we knew he was going to be dealing with some stuff like that.
Yeah, it was a really effective it was a really effective directorial
decision. I hate to nitpick that one little part, but it was pretty good.
No, it was a good one. I'm glad you did, because I wasn't going to reference it, but no, it was really well done. No, it's funny, there is speaking of continuity, there is some precedent for the idea that cameras are basically everywhere. In the very first episode, in the pilot episode, in the second hour of it, when Riker finally joins the Enterprise, and it's after Q had already shown up and had dicked with Picard and the crew before Riker got on board, Riker comes over, Picard says, go sit down over there and get filled in by in terms of what's happened already. And they show him still shots from the previous hour, hour, and it's like, are there cameras just kayfabe? Are there cameras everywhere? So there is some precedent for that.
It makes sense when you got petabytes or whatever petabytes of data that are just recording 24/7. Like they talk about life signs and heat signatures and everything else like that. So I mean, there's a chance they're recording everything, and that's where they get their info from.
And nano cameras just floating around in the air, I guess. Breathe them in. So after that, we've got so Rios is up late. He's kicking around a soccer ball on the sort of deck area, I guess.
He's shirtless and no shoes on, and he's
looking
being
sexy, man. He's looking sexy.
If he can do it, why can't I?
That's a conversation for another time. He obviously goes to the gym quite a bit.
And I go to Cheesecake Factory quite a bit.
So I'm with you on that one. So he's playing some sexy soccer late at night, and Dr. Girardi comes out, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry if I waked you." And the Rios character is so likable. Number one, he's not played by a cheesy actor. The actor they got is just super charismatic, very understated. You want to be around this guy. And so when Girardi comes out, I'm thinking to myself, she's not good enough for you, Rios. But he's but they've had this connection. They've had some flirtations.
She was kind of ooh, and he definitely picked up on it. He's oh yeah.
This is going to make it difficult. So they end up they talk a little bit, and they kiss basically almost off the bat. And she's like, I've never slept with a captain before. He's like, well, I highly recommend it. Me horny. and then so she's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I know exactly. We're children, dude. So he's like, so anyway, stop it. So he's all sensitive. tell me what you're feeling. And she's like, I feel lonely. I feel hopeless.
Well, no, because she goes, I have a sixth sense about when I'm about ready. I have a superpower, and a superpower, what's that? The superpower when I'm about ready to do something really bad. He goes, that's not much of a superpower. And then when she's just like, okay, I'm going to do this, he steps back and it's like, okay, tell me how you really feel. Like, he tries to almost remove himself from the situation, going, do you, I mean, I'm down to clown, but do you really, really want to do this?
Yeah, and consent has reached full, like, consent then.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no ambiguity, man.
And it would be a moment, he's hot and sweaty and ready, and she comes in all vulnerable, and then he took the time to be like, I'm Mr. Sensitive.
Yeah, he's a good
Look,
guy.
I understand you're going through a hard time. I mean, I'm here to comfort you in every sense of the word, but are you sure this is what you need right now?
Yeah, totally.
And she kind of does. And then she kind of grabs his hand and leads him off, and we can assume there was some...
Full anal. Just anal all night long.
Space. They turn off the gravity and they have some
weird awkward 69ing and no gravity.
That's your thing, man.
Don't look at me, dude. Don't look at me.
No, you're the one saying it.
All right. So here we go.
Anyway.
Narek and Rizzo, speaking of awkward sex, Narek and his sister Rizzo.
Why is that tension there, man? She's more into it than he is, but it's...
He's not into it. She is.
Are you sure they're actually siblings, or is it one of those things where they're all like raised orphan, like assassins?
Oh, that could be. That could
they're
totally
called
be,
siblings. Yeah. Because it's weird, man. I'm not down for that. Like I said last time, the whole siblings with the incestuous vibe. You don't have to have it that way. You can have sinister siblings or sinister twins without that connotation.
Yeah, I'm not into it, man.
But yeah. She's all like touching his cheek and being all friendly, and he's just like, you're weird.
Like back up and playing with my Rubik's Cube. So he is playing with like a little Romulan Rubik's Cube type thing.
So she is, and then he's like, that's mine, don't break it.
Yeah, and she's like, when I was a kid, I always wanted to smash this thing with a hammer and just get the prize inside. And that's a perfect metaphor for their different approaches to stuff. She's very blunt force. Just use violence if necessary. Just go in there and do the job. And he's like, no, we can achieve our goals through finessing the situation, and it works. And you see that metaphor play out in the scene with this little toy. And he's basically saying, Soji dreams. She has nightmares. That's programmed. That's something that... And Rizzo writes it off as a bug, and he's like, no, man, it's the opposite. This is designed to lead her to her own truth, that her synth side and her human, what she believes is her human side, they're reconciling each other. And if we play this correctly, we can get the info we want. We can find out where she's from, and I mean that's the gist of the conversation. Did I miss anything?
No, yeah, that was basically the gist, because he opens up the cube.
It was we can do this without triggering her defense mechanisms, which is what they want, obviously.
Yeah, and then she's just like, "Oh, you're so smart, you figured it out." And he goes, "Not only did I figure it out, you need to have patience with this. Not only figuring out what buttons to press, but then let it come naturally. And then after like 5 seconds of holding it, a little it folds open, a little figurine pops out." So he has the ways. It is foreshadowing to what's going to happen, is that he has the ways, once he's got to know Soji by getting in her bed, he's kind of figured out how to work her. And it was just foreshadowing of it. This is how we do it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Back on the bridge of I know that ship has a name. I always forget what it is. They try to figure out how to get onto the cube without the Tal Shiar. Basically, like, they can't just show up. The Romulans are going to be like, nope. And Dr. Jurati says, well, maybe we can say we're scientists. And Picard's like, if a Romulan doesn't, recognize me, one of the Borg will. That's not going to work. We need to go down the Brat Biat way, or whatever it's called. Full disclosure. He says, if we can get some diplomatic status via the Borg Reclamation Project, which is its own aspect of the artifact of the cube, there is this sort of, I guess we can assume it's sort of like a multi, including the Federation, is sort of a multi planetary project to reclaim these Borg, because the Borg, of course, are assimilated from all different races, so you'd assume that it is, a multi-planetary affair.
Yeah, a little bit of help from everybody. All the top scientists that are in that field would be there. And so he's like, well, we need it in. He goes, well, I know the main guy that's in charge of it. But they're like, well, we still don't have the credentials. What are we going to do?
Yeah. So they bring in Raffi. And
a very drunken and high Raffi.
She is both. She is on the booze and she is on the snake oil, snake stuff.
Snake venom?
Snake leaf, whatever it is. Anyways, and yeah.
It's a vaping pen. It's a vaping pen.
Yeah, it's a vaping pen. It's a jewel. So she calls her friend who is... Did you read this as a captain or an admiral? Because the pips were right here.
I didn't catch it. I've watched it twice, and unfortunately I didn't see what it was.
I know there were 4 pips. I don't know if it was an... I'm pretty sure it was just a captain. So she calls her friend and is like, hey, JL needs his diplomatic status. We're going to the... And she's like, no, there's no way I can do that. It's not possible. And she was like, well... In 3 hours, I'm going to be there, so hopefully we won't get killed. And
if you don't want an incident, intergalactic or not intergalactic,
basically an international intergalactic incident.
Yeah, she's like, we need this, and she's just like, oh my goodness, Raffi, I'm going to strangle you. Yeah. And she goes, she said, Picard has 24 hours, and she was up front too. She's like. She didn't give him all the details, but she's like, Picard goes in, needs to talk to somebody there, and get out. And then she's like, Picard has 24 hours. Do me a favor. Don't call me again. As your friend, don't call me again. Because their banter was really, really good. And Raffi's like, oh, I know your skeletons. And she's like, oh, that was a long time ago. Their banter, like, their old friendship played off really well. But then Raffi kind of pulled a jerk move. And then she's like, yeah, don't do that ever again.
Yeah, she sort of burned that particular bridge.
Yes, I said the same thing to Alyssa this morning. She's like, "Yeah, she burnt that. That business bridge is gone." And
gone.
Then after she got off the phone, she just down, and she's like, she has that whole hungover look and everything else. And then Picard gets up, and everybody starts clapping. You put on a good performance.
Yeah, it seemed a little bit inappropriate because Raffi is obviously in a bad way. And they're like, oh, good job, Raffi. And as opposed to going over and saying, hey, Raffi, put a hand on her shoulder and say, hey, man, thanks. I know you're in a bad state. They're like, hey, good job, Raffi. And she gets up.
But to get a standing ovation from Picard, that's something.
Yeah, it seemed really condescending, man. It seemed really condescending. So he got his diplomatic status. She stumbles back to bed with her bottle. We're back on the cube. Narek mentions that Soji's calls with her mom, according to the logs, are exactly 70 seconds every single time. She had sort of mentioned earlier that he was like, hey, did you call your mom? And she's like, yeah, I fell asleep. And he's like, it's weird. All those calls are the exact same amount of time, and they're only 70 seconds. And she's like, that's not true. And he's like, yeah, totally. I can show you the log. I'm very smart.
Yeah, because he said all transmissions come in and out of the ship. Mm-hmm. All those Borg are 100%. He's like, anything gets flagged that's awkward, we're gonna find out. And he goes, everything, all of your calls are 70 seconds exactly.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, they're not. And he goes, well, they are. I can show you.
Yeah. So then we're back on the ship, and Rios, in a very gentle way, is putting Raffi to bed. She sort of drunkenly confesses about her kid. It was a nice little moment. The actors have a chemistry that you can tell they have known each other. Like the characters have known each other for a very long time. She sort of mentions that. She's like, "Hey, how long have we known each other?" And he's like, "A long time." So their relationship obviously probably goes back to Starfleet. Yeah. And she talks about having her kid, and he's like, man, she falls asleep, and he just says, Raph, nobody gets it perfect. And then he leaves with the bottle. He
takes the bottle away from her while she's drunken. Yeah. And he covers her up. She falls asleep, and he kind of tucks her in, which is nice. Yeah,
it's a sweet moment. We're back with Soji, and she's like, I'm going to talk to my mom for longer than 70 seconds and see what happens. Her mom. Her mom's program is like the least sophisticated. Like, to be awake for only 70 seconds. Like, you'd think this guy, Maddox, has created the perfect human synth hybrid, and or not hybrid necessarily, but the perfect human replicated synth, and he can't create a program like a more expansive. Hey mom, how are you doing? Program like for it's 70. You talk to this person for 70 seconds, and and she falls asleep.
Well, here's the thing though: is that okay? So the "What's wrong, dear"? We've heard that several times from this program, and then the other thing too is that she's just like, "Oh, you're just getting tired. It's not that big of a deal." And she's like, "No, I need to talk to you a little bit," and we can tell it's either an audio or a visual or both, and something causes her to begin to. You're working. You're in the middle of the day. What are you calling for? She goes, you just need to lay your head down. You just need to rest a little bit. And so she does something that I didn't catch the first time. She's like trying to keep awake. She grabs like a knife or something and like stabs her own hand.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
try to wake up.
What? Yeah, try to keep awake and everything. But whatever her mom is doing, she begins to put her head down on the table, and then the picture glitches and her face is in one position and then glitches and it's in a different position. So yeah, whatever communication she's having with her mom puts her to sleep. And whether that's to update Soji's programming or whether that's to... We don't know what it's doing, but it does affect both girls, or did affect both girls.
Yeah, I mean, you just sort of figure that it's part of her programming to fall asleep after 70 seconds of being on, whatever this fake transmission line is.
Which is weird because we always know that Data. There's several episodes where we talk about Data's internal chronometer, whatever it's called.
Chronometer, yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
His internal clock.
Yeah, and so there's been references where he has to check it, and it's interesting, but they're organic and inorganic, but they don't have that built in. She didn't know. So when Maddox says they're perfectly imperfect, it's going to be interesting to see what they do and don't have capabilities of.
Yeah. So anyways, after that, Picard, so she falls asleep. Picard then lets on... Well, they find out that Picard he's not allowed to bring anybody with him. And even Elnor can't come. And Elnor's like, hey, I'm coming with you. And he's like, no, I'm ordering you to stay here. And Picard has Daj's necklace. We see that. And so, yeah, he has to go over by himself. He's not entirely thrilled about that. Jurati seemed to want to go. And Rios was like, oh, you seem disappointed. And she was like, nah, I didn't really want to go in the first
I'm really relieved, not disappointed.
Yeah, they really built... I mean, the one thing about this, the one thing that I love is that they take stuff that, is portrayed... And the Borg were always portrayed as obviously like the biggest threat. But they really are able to get across how much of a boogeyman the Borg were, given how everybody talks about them. And that's one thing that you never really got, being a first-hand witness as the audience, or second-hand, I guess, as a second-hand witness to all the events that took place with the Borg, how it affects, and I mentioned this last week, how that stuff affected people who have only heard about it through, like, third-hand or through history books or wherever or whatever. There is this sort of boogeyman aspect to the Borg that people have in their minds. And so they've very effectively communicated that.
Yeah, definitely.
So after that, Soji wakes up from her phone call with Mom, and she's like, man, I totally fell asleep again. And then she gets in her head, she's like, you know what? Let's do a test here. And she starts testing all of her old mementos, her pictures, her diary, with her little DNA scanner thing, or her half-life scanner, whatever it is, carbon dating thing.
What it is, it's a carbon dater. Let's just say it was a tricorder with carbon dating on it.
Yeah.
Or a carbon dating scanner.
Yeah.
And she's scanning everything she can think of, a bunch of pictures, and everything keeps on popping out. Was it 37 months old?
37
months old.
Everything is the exact same age.
Everything. Even drawings that she did as a child, still 37 months old. She's like, this can't be right. And so a picture she had framed of Daj and Soji and her mom, she breaks and scans in 37 months old, and she's just like freaking out, saying, how can this only be a couple years old? This makes no sense.
Right, exactly.
Couple years old, yeah.
So back in the cube, Picard beams over, and it's like dark, and it's secluded. Mm-hmm. He's in an area that seemingly nobody else is at, and so he's...
Why would you beam in there? That makes no sense.
Well, they gave him... No, they gave him... Remember, they gave him...
Well, they gave him coordinates, but...
Coordinates. Like, hey, let's mess with this guy.
That's not a coordinates. That's not a welcoming pad at all.
No,
They put him in. They transport him to the janitor's closet.
Basically, yeah. There's like all sorts of weird, creepy, like mutilated ex-Borgs around. Like eventually, he shows up and he's all by himself and he's looking around. And he's like going through and he's having flashbacks. Like the triggering is in full effect. The PTSD is in full effect. He starts freaking out. He sort of stumbles across a thing. There's like a ledge nearby.
Yeah,
and then
he's
he gets
down
accosted. Yeah, and then you get the vertigo shot. They do that. And then he gets accosted by two Borg that are ex-Borg, and they know what they're doing. And he's like, "Oh, get off me, get off me!" And then Hugh says, "They're trying to help you. They don't want you to fall." And he comes to, and the Borg leave him alone. And then he sees Hugh, and this is the one thing I'm so glad, because we talked about this last week, that they were not able to cast, or they did not cast Maddox with the original actor. This was necessary. If you couldn't get Jonathan Del Arco as Hugh,
it wouldn't have worked.
It would not work at all. This is
I agree,
the two.
100%.
This is one of those moments where, and we're gonna get a big one next week, where the two actors, it's almost even more special than a reunion between that we're gonna see next week with Picard and Riker. It's almost more special that it's Hugh, who is only in a small handful of episodes, but Picard had such a great impact on him. And the actor is portraying Hugh in such a perfect way. He still has that softness to him, but he's fully in command and fully confident. And it's such a delightful portrayal and realization of that character.
And then not only that, but Picard sees not only how good he has adjusted, but then he also sees that he's in a position of authority. I mean, he sees
he's excelling. Exactly.
Yeah, and he's like, I knew this person, I helped this person, break out, and now they're doing amazing things. Picard didn't even know what he was doing. I mean, he kind of did, but then once Hugh
when
pulls
he
back
goes
the
in
curtain,
there and he learns, it's a big moment.
And then Picard's just like, I mean, he's almost like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. This is wonderful, and it really shows. But yeah, that moment when it's Hugh, and they're affectionate. They hug. I mean, there's a lot of little things on there.
And it's funny because the show is, in general, like we saw last week, especially with that opening scene. It's a bleak time we're living in, like things are not all hunky-dory. And so it makes these moments of emotion, of familiarity, of family, where they hug, it makes them so much more effective than if it was just all the time. Like every episode he's running into people he knows and he's hugging. This was such an earned moment when Hugh sees him and he says, "I don't know what you want here, but I will help you in any way I possibly can." And then they hug, and it was like the first time the actors have hugged since it felt so genuine and so real.
Yes, it did.
Because there's like a little chuckle between them, and I got goosebumps watching it. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. It was just a really, really sweet moment.
It was brilliantly acted, and like you said, again, re-getting the actor who played Hugh back is what made this scene.
Absolutely. It would not have worked if it was a different way. They should not have done Hugh if they didn't get that actor. He's terrific. Yes. So they sort of journey through the Borg cube, and Hugh shows Picard the work they're doing. And Hugh is very, in these first moments as Picard is journeying through, Hugh has now taken on the role of the fatherly figure or the caretaking figure, where this has been reversed. Picard is a very fragile person in this environment, and there's some really wonderful little subtle and not so subtle acting moments from Patrick Stewart where he's sort of cowering as the Borg are around him, and Hugh puts his arms on him and says, "You're safe here. This was a cube a long time ago, but it's not that anymore." And he mentions this. He's talking to Picard about what's going on, and he referenced them, the former Borg, as XBs. And Picard says, "What's that?" And he says, "It's what we call us former Borg." And he says, "Us." And he says, a new name can be the first step to a new identity. I learned that on the Enterprise all those years ago. And and it's a really wonderful moment where Hugh is really able. It's like you bring your parent to work day, basically, like, hey, or to school day. Look at all the stuff that I've done.
Yep. And they did a
Picard's
really
very
good job. They did a really good job too. There's a gal who was, they removed the implants, and then we know. Well, I don't know how some people know that this work, but when your skin starts to heal after a fresh wound, your skin has a natural weave to it, which gives you the tone and everything else. But when you get a scar on your hand, it's your skin healing too fast, right? It's instead of being woven like it's supposed to, it heals so fast it doesn't match the natural lining. So they're taking a dermal regenerator and smoothing over some of the places where it healed too fast, or some of the grafting is. And Picard is just in awe of not only the fact that they are getting them out. He's like, I didn't know you could be unassimilated to this extent, even. And like they were all torn face, and then they were taking out and smoothing out some of the scar tissue. And he's like, I never thought it could be done, and never done on this scale. You're doing amazing work.
Yeah, that comes there. So we get back to Soji.
Sorry, did I skip ahead?
Let's see here. Where are we? So Picard. Okay, so Picard tells at that point. He tells Hugh that, hey, I'm looking for Soji, and he's like, oh yeah, I totally know who she is, and I'm pretty sure she's in danger, right? That's why you're here. Yeah. And Picard's like, how'd you figure that? He was like, well, let's see here. Let's count the ways. There's a Romulan spy who's obviously asking about her, and he's trying to act like he's not. You're here, and you seem worried, and then there was like something else. And so he's like, yeah, so let's go find her. And Picard's like, hey, let's go find her. We're back in her apartment. Narek is there, and she's telling Narek, all this stuff is 37 months old. It don't make a lick of sense. And he's like, hey, I know this Romulan ritual, which can help you understand your dreams and move through them more than when you're in your sleeping state. And it's called the Zalmak or something like that.
Yeah, some of the Romulan words are very, very. It's about as bad as it's basically Vulcan. But we apologize.
Damn closed captioning, and it wasn't working on CBS All Access. So
it worked on ours this morning, but we also what were you using? Okay, that's the 2%. What do you watch through?
No, so I was watching. It's funny because I watch it. I watched it the first time on actually my phone on the CBS app, which is great. And then I went to the Fire Stick, which is less great at night, but then during the day, it's much better. But like when I turned it on, the subtitles were already on, and I turned them off because I don't like them. But then when I had to hear, I wanted to know what planet Picard, and I found out what planet Picard was going to meet the rendezvous point at the end. Mm-hmm. And then at that point I was like, well, I got to rewind this and figure out what this planet is, and the subtitles weren't working. So
So I have an iPhone, and this morning we watched it a second time. Me and my wife were fortunate enough to watch it this morning on our PlayStation. You can watch it on Xbox. The app is everywhere, but it's a little finicky on certain devices. But it's still pretty good though, all things considered.
So phonetically, it sounded like he said a Zammak, something like that.
Yeah,
Zammak. So anyways, she's like, okay, cool. Then we get back to Picard and Hugh as they're going to her quarters. And that's where Picard really says...
Sorry. No, I jumped ahead.
It all meshes in together. It's fine. He's like, man, he says, because there's one great shot of like an XB, and he's getting like his skin, the thing you were talking about, the skin tissue, the scar tissue is being a bit, it's being healed up. And he sort of looks over at Picard and Hugh with like a smile, and almost like an overwhelmingly emotional smile. Like, there's like a tear.
Like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is happening. I never thought I could recover this much.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, if you think about it, it is a pretty shocking thing, and it's pretty awesome that they're addressing this. Like, man, how far can you bring a Borg back? Evidently quite a bit. And Picard says, finally we can show people you're showing people what Borg are. They're not monsters, they're victims. It was a really wonderful line.
And I think that's also the thing where Picard, I didn't think he learned that. I mean, it's great because now he has Hugh, but that's a moment that kind of, he has his highs and his lows. He remembers, he hates the Borg, and then he finishes the Queen, and then he goes back to the cube, and then he realizes they're victims. There's going to be ebbs and flows with his not saying a love-hate, but a hate and his depth of hate with the Borg, which I think it's a natural emotion. I mean, it plays really, really well.
Well, it's the natural evolution from that episode from Iborg, the episode that introduced you, where Picard was like, nope, throw a disease in him and send him back, and that's it. And everybody meets Hugh, and they're like, no, man, I'm pretty sure this guy is salvageable, and he's a person. And Picard's like, nope. And then Guinan says, have you met him? And he's like, stop calling him him. It's an it. And she's like, well, how are you going to do this? How are you going to send this guy back with a disease to kill his entire people and you're not even going to look him in the eye? And so Picard does, and that's when he...
I can't believe Guinan didn't call him, you narrow-minded...
Yeah, I know. And she says, all the effing hubris.
Yeah.
No, so he does meet Hugh, and that's when he learns, okay, no. And we get that final scene there in that episode where Hugh sort of looks back as he's beaming back to the Borg. The damage is done. He's an individual. We see it later on in the Descent episodes and, of course, here in Picard. So Rios is back with Raffi. He gets her some coffee.
Real quick, at the end of that, after they get done showing the XB stuff, Hugh's just like, oh, wait, Soji called in sick. Let's go look for her.
Yeah, people
and then
call
they cut
sick
over
in the
to
future,
Raffi.
apparently. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Calling in sick.
They don't go to the doctor, get a hypo spray, and then be like, okay, go back to work.
Yeah. So Rios gets Raffi some coffee, and he's like, well, you won the bet. Or no, you owe me 2 strips of latinum. You lost the bet. Soji is alive. And she's like, that was a fair bet that I took. And then she thinks about it. She's like, why would she still be alive? Like, what did they need her for something? There's no way she'd still be alive. If there are Romulans on that thing and they know who she is, which is obvious, they need something for her, from her. So then we're back and we're finding that out. Narek takes Soji to like a very concentrated Romulan area of the cube. They make a point of showing Romulans everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And then he takes her to like a shrine, and it reminded me of the shrines of the Bajorans, except with lanterns on the floor.
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. And so it's he has to get through a security guard, a sub commander, and he's like, this is only for Romulans, not round ears. And I'm like, hey, whoa. And so Narek is like, he's like, you better back up. He talks to him in Romulan. He's like, if you like those stripes, sub commander, you'll back up. And so he does. So he takes her in the room, and like you said, it's like a shrine. There's like a maze type thing, or like a path, sort of engraved or painted or whatever on the hardwood.
Yeah, they're just on there. Are we to believe that this is the second time we've seen Romulans being racist, or are we to believe? That's one thing I can think of as racist. Are we to believe that like Romulans are kind of led that way right now?
Well, they've always looked down on humans. And so it's...
Well, but this is the second time, though, we've seen, like, on that planet, it says Romulans only. And then she's like, oh, he's round-eared. But there's a lot of other creatures. You got Ferengi, you got, Klingons, there's a lot of other round-eared cultures. So I'm like, this is the second time it's been hinted at. And I don't want to stereotype Romulans. That's not what I'm here to do. But it seems like that way. Like, they might have that tendency towards, we lost our planet. We're trying to keep our culture pure and keep it
I definitely think that there's probably, look, from where they were before, which was arguably the big dogs of the galaxy, or at least the 2 quadrants
of the beta quadrant.
They would always look down on humans and everybody else, probably especially Klingons. To going from it, it's probably just it was probably already there, and it's probably been amplified by the insecurities of hey, we lost our son, and the humans were the ones who tried to come in and save us, and there's probably a lot of insecurity there, I would think.
Yeah.
So she goes in there, and so at that point, to sort of fully get her into the moment, he gives her his real name, which, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, I think, while I was looking that up, you might have mentioned this, they talk about, or she mentions, that Romulans, when they're talking to strangers or anybody else that they haven't given their heart over to, they give basically a kayfabe name, like a fake name, or stage name. And then only when they have opened up their heart to somebody do they reveal their real name. he had sort of an accent on his name, and so he says, "My name is Cheyenne." I think that's what, again, I put it phonetically, so whatever that was.
Yeah. That's exactly as I took it. And he did kind of pronounce that a little bit more phlegm.
Cheyenne. Yeah. So anyways, like I said, it's like a maze on the floor, and she sort of, together, she leads him and he leads her through the dream. We find out also while this is happening, Rizzo, his sister, is listening in, and she's got a computer set up going. Soji is able to push through the limits of her dream through this ritual.
Because he's just like, he's like, hey, you heard of the storm. Look out the window. I can't. Focus, sit there, think. She looks out the window. She's like, okay, I finally am doing it. I see a tree. Okay, so it's not just about the dream itself, but he says absorb yourself in every tiny little minute detail that we sometimes do in this podcast.
Yeah.
But he's like, absorb the details.
You know what's funny? Hey, not to cut you off.
Saturating her.
But you know our little Twitter chat group. I did not notice the Voyager theme from last week.
Oh, really? Oh, I got goosebumps. I really, really love the music in this. They have music directions. And obviously, I mentioned they have 9 series from music and stuff they can pull from. But yeah, when 7 beams away, it's the bum, 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 like little tiny musical notes that are sprinkled throughout. There's also a next-gen... what would you call it? A musical cue?
Yeah.
There's a next-gen musical cue in this episode.
In this episode earlier on,
Yeah, go back and listen to it. The music is very well done with those things sprinkled throughout. So
that's really cool. I didn't notice that before, but I meant when you said that, I was like, I got to go back and check it out.
Oh, yeah. We apologize. I was going to mention that last week, and I completely forgot.
Yeah, it's fine. So anyways, so in her dream, when she usually has it, she's not able to see her dad. She's not able to see through these orchids that he has sort of in the middle of his lab. But because of this ritual, she's able to push past that. Her dad turns around and she cannot see his face. His face is like a really creepy blur. And then she's able to push past that and see what he's working on. And it's honestly the creepiest thing.
It is creepy, but it's actually, I'll tell you one other thing too, though. The face is, like, you can see his body. His face is completely just like...
Yeah.
Like not whitewashed, but like tan washed out.
Yeah.
And he's like, go ahead, hide behind the corner. What are the orchids hiding? Did you notice on her bedside table, she has one of those wooden drawing hands and a wooden sketch doll?
And there's a doll. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point.
And so on the table is a Pinocchio version of her face. It looks just like her, but wood. And the rest of her body is like stick figure, like
and
the
it's
drawing
like
models you can buy.
Yeah.
And body parts missing. And it's the grass actually looks really cool, but it's also really creepy.
It's really creepy, yeah. She's like, it's a wooden doll version of me. And she's like, so she, and then she mentions looking up through the skylight and seeing electrical storms and 2 blood moons. So Rizzo immediately says, okay, let's narrow this down. I need to find out which location, what planet has 2 red moons and constant electrical storms, and then she goes, so they're finding out where this is.
Yeah, those were the hints. That's what he needed to unlock. So the whole what was it called? The what's the name of the episode?
Impossible Box.
Impossible Box was, you could think of the cube as the Impossible Box itself. Why she's there. She's the Impossible Box, figuring out, how she is, why she is. And then that box, he has the Impossible Box, but then her dream. So it's like, there's like several, like 4 metaphors inside the title, which worked really, really well.
Yeah.
Which I really, really liked. And so when he's saying, absorb the details, look up, and then all of a sudden she's like, I can see all these details. What does all this mean? Like, he's like, you've done your job. And she's like, what do you mean I've done my job? This makes no sense at all. And then
he says, you found home. And then she says, well, why was I on the workbench? And he said, and he's crying because he feels for her.
Yeah.
And he says,
and it sucks.
He says, because you're not real. And she's like, what does that mean? He puts the box down and then he leaves and the door closes behind him. And she's like, oh crap. And then she runs over there and she's like, Narek, she's banging on the door. The box opens up and then some red, like, misty radiation stuff comes out.
It's almost like it very, very, very much reminds me of Nemesis. Like the whole the beginning of Nemesis when the thing goes up and comes down. This is just like a smoke of nanites or something that's sprawling out. Because the first time when you undid the box, it was like a little figurine of a little woman or something. And then this second time, it's this like little mechanical thing, and it comes out. And she's like, Narek, 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 and she's crying and panicking, and she drops to her knees and she starts hitting the floor. And the floor is made of wood or bamboo or whatever. And then she realizes, oh, I can get out of here. She starts hitting the floor, and it gets stronger and stronger. And all of a sudden, she's pulling up bamboo, and then she starts peeling back metal. And the guy that at the door, he's like, Narek? And he looks over, and she's just like, see ya, and then drops to the hole she created.
It's and it's great because if it was anything normal, it probably wouldn't have been filmed like this. But they crank up or they crank down the frame rate of the film or the video, whatever they're using, the way they used to with Data when he would do things extra fast. And so you see her banging on the floor, and it's coming apart because she's an android and she's super strong. And they make her a little bit faster than normal, the way they used to with Data whenever they do that. And it has just that little level of cheesiness to it that Data's had back in the day when it was like super cheesy, but it was very effective. It was very reminiscent of Data.
You and me disagree with this too, but I'd rather see movies in cinema go to 48, 60 frames a second.
Oh, no. That's the worst.
I know you hate it, but it's good for sports. Like if I was going to sit there and watch...
but that's it.
Sports virtual reality experience. I was gonna go see The Hobbit in 48 frames a second, and I didn't get to see it. I want to see. See, that's the thing, is that when you start watching something that's such a high frame rate, it gives that BB. In case we don't know, people who are watching don't know what we're talking about. When you go to a Best Buy and you see a TV that almost looks 3D. Without looking 3D, it's the BBC or the soap opera effect is because the camera's running at a higher frame rate. And so it pulls you out of the experience, but then if you're watching it the whole entire time, it sucks you back in because you can see every single blemish, every single flaw, every single piece, and I love it. But again, for purposes, if you shoot at a high frame rate and then you slow it down to 30 frames a second, or you speed it up even faster, you get those really cool effects.
Yeah. It's not good. So
it's amazing.
She goes down. Picard and Hugh.
Hold on 1 second. Mod chat, I'm right here. Picard chat can say, I love conflict. That's one conflict that you and me will never see eye to eye on, because we talked about that today. High frame rate.
No way. So anyways, Hugh and Picard, they're in her apartment still. And they're like, what is all this going on here? This is weird.
Yeah, because she was scanning the whole time, and the papers and pictures were everywhere. And then Narek just ripped her out of there and says, hey, come with me. So it looks like almost there was a struggle. But then Picard's like, hey, she's becoming unlocked. She's realizing something's going on.
He says she's become activated because Hugh gets a schematic up on his little thing. And he's like, she's in between levels, and she's moving really fast. And Picard takes that and is like, oh, she is activated.
Yeah. He's like, he's faster than she shouldn't be. And then, because Hugh doesn't know yet that she's what she is. And then he's activated because there's no time to explain what's really going on. Hugh just trusts Picard that much, and I love that.
Yeah. So she's moving fast. They start going to her location, and then she falls through the ceiling, and Picard's like, come with me. And he gets out the necklace, like, your dad or your sister gave me this. And she's like, do you know what's happening to me? And he's like, yes, I know everything. Just trust me, please. And then Hugh says, there are Romulans coming our way. And he's like, trust me, please. And then she takes a second. She takes his hand, and she does.
Hold on.
Oh, so that's when Picard, we got audio issues sometimes.
Yeah, sorry. No, so when she falls through the skylight, it kind of reminds me of your skylight that we talked about today. Yeah. Come with me if you want to live. Yeah. Anyway, so when he's sitting there, like he implores her like 3 times, and it's almost a little awkward how often he's like, please come with me. And she's like, please come with me.
Yeah.
Please come with me. It took me out of the moment for a quick second, but then she looked up and she has, marks on her face, and I don't know if the nanites did something, started eating away at her, or if it was from falling to the floor, but she eventually sees the necklace. She goes, oh crap, she has the other necklace, and they take off. They go bolting, and then they start heading towards the secret Queen's laboratory. Or,
so they go to the Queen's
throne room.
Yeah, the Queen's chamber, exactly. And Hugh brings up the thing where I was endlessly talking about at the beginning of the episode, the Sicarian spatial projector. Now, this is a door you can go through. Evidently, I got to watch this episode of Voyager. You can go through a door, and it'll take you within 40,000. I wonder if they bring up the Iconians, because I always loved that
probably
thing.
I do too, and basically it's not even a door. It's just like either a screen, like a thin layer, like a millimeter layer of energy you go through, or it's just a beam and you go through and you disappear. And yeah, Hugh's just like, hey, there's an emergency back door for the Queen to always exist. And Hugh's like, Picard, you know about this, don't you? And he goes, wait, yeah, I do. And Alyssa, I don't even know if she's still up here, but she mentioned something. She's not. Okay. She mentioned something earlier about how, like, the Borg still have things in the back of their mind that they're all interlinked.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And they all have memories that they don't have access to until they see it, and they're like, oh my goodness, even though I've never been in this room, I know exactly what this room is. I know how to access this stuff, because the Borg are all interlinked, but even after they disconnect, they still have some of those memories. And it was really, really interesting. That's a good way of kind of storytelling too. They can bring up, so sometimes you get like a MacGuffin perspective, like this is, how do we get off of here? The Queen had the teleporter.
Yeah, it's
yes.
a bit Deus Ex Machina, or however it's pronounced. Yeah, and then to further
Deus
the
Ex
point,
Machina, but yeah.
Yeah, to further the point, Soji says, because he's like, it can take you to within a distance of, and she says 40,000 light years. So there's even further evidence that she's connected to, telling you she's the daughter of the Queen.
Wait! You think you've never said this before? You think she's the daughter of the Queen and Data?
I did. I've said that 2 weeks in a row now. I don't know about necessarily a daughter. I think that she was built from whatever they needed for Data for the sentient stuff, and an element of the Queen. So yeah, that's what I think she is.
Okay, so we have those. I guess we should finish the episode and we can get into this. Let's finish the episode. Remind me to come back to the blank slate, the F8 type drones.
Okay, so
we see a flash of that kind of, but we'll get into that eventually.
Okay, so anyways, Picard has them program the door to go to Nepenthe, or Nepenthe, which is like apparently a Greek name for a planet, or it's a planet that's named. It's a Greek word. For a rendezvous, he contacts Rios. Is like, rendezvous here. Hugh, load up that planet. So he does. Soji's like, more guards are coming. I can tell. Hugh says, okay, it's time for you guys to go. The Romulans show up, and of course they are murdered immediately by Elnor. Because Rios is on the ship, and he's like, oh, wait, where's the kid?
Yeah.
You find out.
And then all of a sudden, you see this, like, green blood spurts on the wall, and these Romulans just fall down to the ground.
Yeah.
And he's sitting there like Samurai Jack or like Ninja Gaiden, just be like, shink. It's like he goes, I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And then they fall down on the ground.
And Picard is like, what are you doing here? I ordered you not to come. And then he's like, well, I'm tethered to your cause, so I had to. And he's like, well, I'm detethering you from your cause. And he's like, I decline. And then he's like, you guys go. I will cover your escape. And Picard says, I'm not going to leave you behind again. And Elnor says, well, I'm very happy. It pleases me greatly that you said that. But you need to go
this time instead of last time.
Yeah, exactly.
It was so. He's like, "Oh, I'm happy to see you, and I'm glad." It's such a bittersweet moment between the two of them because Elnor gets the not the acceptance. What's the word I'm looking for? If you're glad you get that acceptance from your father, I can't think of what it is, but he finally gets that from Picard, and he goes, "Oh, my dad."
He gets the validation that he's been looking for.
The validation, there you go. I'm looking for. He gets the validation he's looking for, and he goes, "Since I got that validation, I will do anything for you. But right now, me protecting you is more important than anything else. You two go." Picard says, "But there's, I guess, a fleet of Romulans coming." So Soji and Picard go through this white beam of light, disappear, and that leaves Hugh and Elnor. Like, Elnor's sword ready to go, and Hugh's... And then that's where the episode ends.
Well, the episode ends on they're about to confront the guards, and we hear, and the door closes, and then we hear Elnor say, "Please, my friends, choose to live, and we know how that ends. So they're not going to choose to live, and he's going to choose to kill them. And then that's how the episode ends. So what's your take on Soji at this point? Did you have one?
I like Dodge a little bit better.
No. I mean, so I brought up her being a spawn of the Queen and Data, and I thought that you had something to counter that.
No. So we've seen a couple of flashes where we see the fake or the blanket drones, right? Which are supposed to be like fake Data. They're like bald and they have a weird nose.
Okay, yeah.
F8, right? So I'm wondering if we took basically like a because we know he had the embryo, and then he has to put that spark from wherever it came from Data, the neuro.
The positronic, whatever.
Yeah, the positronic net. Yeah, one of the neurons from the positronic net in there. And then the knowledge of the Borg. I'm wondering if he took this hodgepodge and then he helped it grow like the Borg do. Like he helped store them and grow them really, really fast using some kind of Borg technology. But using Borg technology, that's the only thing. The only missing link I have with that is to get the knowledge. Don't they have to be synced with the collective?
Yeah, which obviously she was somehow.
Or they took some knowledge from the cube and then downloaded it into her. My only thing is I think he might have used technology. That knowledge, the knowledge he had from the cube or from the artifact might have been downloaded into Soji. But it's hard to tell what exactly.
Well, he knew Maddox knew he had a working relationship of some sort with Bajazil, who was in the business of Borg parts. So it's not unlikely that he might have gotten to that business in order to get some stuff that he needed for Soji and Daj. I think that because the Romulans are so freaked out by Soji and they call her the Destroyer. I get the feeling that it goes deeper than just regular drone stuff. I think that she's probably linked to the Queen somehow.
And I'm wondering if they have like the perfect storm. Like it was one of those things where we knew the Borg was coming, or whether the Borg was created by Romulans, or however they're going to do their backstory of why the Romulans couldn't be properly assimilated. There's going to be some sort of backstory there. And I think we have most of the puzzle pieces there, and it's just a matter of getting everything to fit together the way it's supposed to. And then we'll find out exactly what's going on. Because standing back and looking at it, it's kind of a mess. But once they start explaining the narrative, you're like, okay, this was foreshadowed by this and that. And they've done a really good job, though, of having all these sprinkling of little things from the story, and we're still talking about it. I mean, that's the great thing about it. We still don't know exactly what's going on, and sometimes in some of these films, I love a great plot twist, and I can usually see it from a mile away. Unless we're nail on the head, I still don't know quite how they're gonna make everything work.
Yeah, I think the pieces are coming into place, but I'm excited for next week because we get to see Commander Riker.
I almost wish they didn't show that, just like with 7 of 9. Like in the episode before.
Hey, by the way, I have to mention this. Next week, we're seeing Commander Riker. He's going to be in the thumbnail.
Come on, man.
I don't know
You're going to spoil it for friendos?
I don't know who's going to be in the thumbnail this week, but next week's going to be Commander Riker.
That's okay, because it's probably going to be the highlight of the episode. Because
I know everybody's going to be talking about it, so of course I'm going to do it in the thumbnail.
Oh, we all love Riker, whether it's clone Riker or it's regular Riker.
I hated fake transporter Riker. That poor bastard. Thomas Riker. You know what happened to him? So,
I saw him in DS9, but I don't know what happened after that.
After the DS9 episode, they did a book where I forget exactly what happened, but he was like part of the Maquis. He ended up in a Cardassian, like basically Cardassian Siberia, like a labor camp, and that's how he ended. Wasn't that mentioned
in Voyager?
Huh?
Wasn't that mentioned in Voyager?
No.
Oh, okay, I thought it was. That sucks, though. I mean, especially finding out about, the whole thing about his dad and everything else. I'm just like, what the heck?
Yeah, Thomas ended up screwed up, man. He made bad decisions.
You have poster board Riker, the way you're supposed to do things.
Yeah.
And then the other Riker that...
And then
Scrubs, your good decisions and your bad decisions.
He was like by himself for 8 years eating like moss or whatever he was eating down there. What a dumb sack of crap that guy was.
Oh, come on, man. You gotta feel empathy, though. It's still Riker.
He should have just killed himself.
Looking.
Anyways.
What the heck? What is wrong with you? Okay,
right.
So I will have to say this is that this has been a great episode. We would like to hear more comments. We're going to get working on some social media stuff, so we cannot wait to hear from you guys. Let us know what you think. Post. You like, tell your friends about us, though. We also have a link in the description for the shirt that Steve, you're wearing. It's nice, man. It's soft, it's fluffy. The link does work properly. We can also get a giant F on a shirt if you want to buy a Friendoville shirt.
Hoodie. Get one of those too.
Shirt.
And then and if you're tired of looking at my face or Tim's face or both of our faces, you can listen to us on any audio podcast app. We're available, so check that out. Thanks for watching, everybody, or thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. Till next time, we'll talk to you later.
Happy anniversary, Alyssa. Bye.